So, next up on this main stage, we are very excited to welcome an elite group of women for our Women in Tech panel. Our panelists today include Maria Haight, CIO, Head of HR, and Head of PMO at TGI Direct; Sue Kotz, VP of Technology Services for RDV Corporation; Kathy Ogurek, VP of IT and Security for Kelly Connect; Christine Shook, Director of Enterprise Architecture at Consumers Energy. And last but certainly not least, your moderator for today's panel, we have Amy Slater, VP of Partner Sales from Genesys. Give these wonderful elite women a round of applause.
Thank you so much for having us here today and this morning. And it's amazing to be able to be at a conference like this and for C3 to put such an emphasis on women in technology. So thank you very much to Matthew and team for allowing us to have this conversation. But before we get started, I'd like a little bit of audience participation. So if you're a woman in the audience, it's kind of hard, can you please stand up?
You can't see.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
Okay. If you have a daughter and you're not already standing, please stand up and stay standing.
I can't see.
And finally, for those of you who are still seated, if you have or have had a mother, please stand up. Now you can see the power of women and the influence in this room. So give yourselves a hand.
Good point.
So again, I was, trying to make a point clearly that women's issues matter, and certainly in business and in technology, which we've all been in collectively for a long time. We haven't added up the years, but it's certainly a lot. Mine alone maybe takes up half of that number for all of us. And it's an exciting time to be in technology and to be a woman in technology. And so we're going to learn a bit from the esteemed panel that we have here, and hope you all have some relatability that you can carry with you upon your departure. So really, this will be for each of you to certainly chime in as it makes sense. But as you've developed your career, what would you say were the key learnings and success factors as you've pivoted throughout your career? I know through conversations we've had in advance, there are a lot of twists and turns, and it's not just a linear path up a ladder. There's a lot of zigging and zagging. It looks somewhat like a web. But I'm going to start with you, Maria, to share a little bit about what you think those might be.
So I can't believe it's 30 years since I started this journey in IT. And I've been in a lot of different industries in IT, and it's the wonderful piece of IT, right? You can go across, and it's relatable. But it has been hard, and and that journey is not over, I think, for our young women yet. So I think there's some key takeaways that our women that are in the audience should think about, and I think the men, from your point and how you can play in this too. Women and everyone, find a sponsor, and that's different than a mentor, right? Someone who speaks to your strengths in the right meetings, and I think that helps get your foot in the door as you're growing throughout your career. I think being a good listener, we're so quick as we listen to people talk to want to solve the solution, start talking about what we're already thinking about. Listen, and then bring solutions to the table. And women, don't be afraid to speak up, because someone hasn't said what you're thinking right now doesn't mean it's not right. Speak up, have that confidence, bring it forward. There's nothing more, I think, it's feeling of bringing a great idea to the table when everybody else goes, I didn't think of that. That's a good one. So I think that confidence has to be there as well.
Great, thank you. Christine, the newcomer on the panel. What are your thoughts on this?
I like to say this is true. I started my career in teaching and somehow landed in technology. And I've had a number of career pivots along the way. And I think my biggest takeaway from that is be willing to say yes. Be willing to try something that you have absolutely no idea what you're getting into, but have that mindset of going in and I'm going to learn, I'm going to try this. If it doesn't work, I can pivot back. It's a two-way door. Or I might really discover that I'm something that I'm really passionate about, like I did. I started at Consumers Energy 20 years ago in the business, and I pivoted to a career in technology, I think 7 years ago, and it's nowhere that I thought I would land if you look at my letters or degrees or whatever you want to reference. And it's because I was willing to say yes, and I was willing to try something new. But one of the other key things that I think that has contributed to my success is I've also spent a lot of time cultivating relationships. And that is so incredibly important because it's not just about what I can get from a relationship, it's just building relationships with the people that I'm working with the teams that I'm leading, and letting people know, hey, I might be interested in going in that direction or pivoting in that direction. And then maybe that person keeps me in mind for an opportunity in the future. But I think more importantly, those relationships that's what matters. We don't get transformations done without the people, and we don't get our work done without the people at the heart of it. So be willing to say yes and build relationships.
Yeah, I love what you say. Over breakfast, I was speaking with Sherry, who drove here from Chicago, and we were sharing that, and she said something similar about, just say yes, be willing to say yes, and said, who would have thought that I would be in technology? And then another team gets brought under her, and she says, well, okay, well, I don't know if I can do it. But again, to the allies in the room, her boss believed in her and said, I know you can do it. Because we do have a high degree of imposter syndrome, certainly as women, that we talk about it more maybe than men in the room do. But that's really where the leaders come in and say, yeah, I believe in you, I think you can do it. So to your point, be willing to say yes, step outside your comfort zone, say, I've never done this before, but I'm certain that I can. Sue, tell us a little bit about you in terms of your pivots.
Yeah, I think for me, it was that willing to say yes and to really stretch myself further than what I thought I could go. So just taking that step years ago, in my careers, I started it in 1990, so it's been a while. And kind of early on in that, I said yes to a global network implementation project that I could lead. And it was going to be in Central and South America, and I knew a little bit of Spanish. But I said yes, and I had those teammates to help support me through it, because like you said, we can't do this alone. We shouldn't even want to do it alone. But really saying that yes, and really stretching yourself. So maybe saying yes to something that looks crazy, honestly, and then accomplishing it with the help of others.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's great, thank you. And Kathy?
So I would add to that, not being afraid to fail, and I think that goes along very nicely with saying yes. Being willing to take a chance and know that if it doesn't work out, that's okay. And you can pivot back, you can ask for help, but as long as you're willing and open to learning and exploring, I think that is a good key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's that ability to synthesize information and, to your point about listening to learn, not listening to solve. But we eventually have to solve problems, but really it's that listening to learn, which I think is so important. And we're going to talk a little bit more as you get to know our panel, really about how you might view yourself and describe yourself as a leader. I've done quite a bit of coaching and mentoring, and oftentimes there might be a misalignment between what you think, who you think you are, and what others think of you and who they think you are. And that really defines your brand. Your brand isn't what you think. Your brand is what others say when you're not in the room, quite honestly. And that's a really important part. And so I'm always interested when I talk to people about how would other people describe you, but then also how would you describe yourself? And you hope that those are in alignment. So Christine, how might you describe yourself as a leader? I know we had a chance to talk a little bit in the hallway about some of the things that you value, but tell us a little bit and tell the audience a little bit about how you would describe yourself.
My leadership mission is, I think, what summarizes it. I'm on a mission to love, serve, and care. It's that simple. And that could be in the workplace, that could be with the nonprofit work that I do. But again, it comes down to the people. I want to love people, I want to serve them, and I want to care for them. And I think that comes through in my leadership style. I have a tendency to take a servant leadership style. I'm also a, side note, self-proclaimed nerd in a lot of different ways. So I like to have a lot of fun too and inject humor throughout the day.
That's great. And across, in terms of how you describe yourself kind of in that role, what are the things, like the most important skills within that you think help you, really act your mission?
I think the top one is probably learning how to hone in your skills with emotional intelligence. Easier said than done. It's learning what it is, learning how you get more emotionally intelligent. Simply put, can you read the room? Can you read people? Can you respond to people? If you can't build some empathy with people, at least build some sympathy with people. But if you can't build that emotional intelligence, it's really hard to connect with people, and then it's really hard to lead. So I've spent a lot of time building that with mentors and coaches and just on-the-job training.
Great. Maria?
I'd love to jump in.
Yeah.
I also align with servant leadership, but there was a time when none of us were leaders, right? And there was something that's always stuck with me. Be the boss you wished you had, right? And so as we grew into our leadership roles, you had to let go of some things along the way, right? I mean, we were all the it person for something, right? We were the knowledge expert for something or some things. And as you grow into management and then you get into leadership, you can't be at that level of detail anymore. And I think that's a very scary situation, specifically for technology people, to say, what's my value add now? And I think that's what we now can give back to our folks who want to grow into leadership roles, is understanding there's a different value. There's a strategic value. There's the people management value, right, that you now bring while you have to kind of let go of some of that. And so what's that other phrase everyone says? You manage projects, but you lead people. And I think that's got to be that part of that thread as you grow your own team and find enough confidence yourself that I'm not going to know that as well as I used to, but I'm now going to learn these other skills that bring the value add to my team, to my boss, to my company.
How do you think people learn to let go of that? I know certainly in sales, and I had a young woman at Genesis approach me last week because she's interested in a leadership role. She doesn't work for me, but she wanted some coaching. And she said, I don't know, she's an individual contributor. How do I let go? How do I let go of that control of this sale and then lead people? And I said, you have to want to do it. And I think those are some of the mistakes we make, is we take high performers who are individual contributors and we put them in management, whether it's sales or technology sales or any other role. We just put them in that role because it's the next step. And so I think it's important as leaders, and certainly as female leaders, to make sure that we're helping coach people that it's okay, that there is value as you move up. We hope so, right? We hope we add value in those ways. And I know various conversations that Matthew had and in the last conversation had to do with the various generations. Certainly, Gen Z, I've got one of those. Again, we can all talk later about that. But really it's going to become just a huge part of our workforce. And understanding the nuances of the different generations. So, Kathy, I'd be interested in your thoughts on how do you view kind of the broad spectrum of age, and also as you think about different phases in your life as a woman in technology. Can you explore that a little bit?
So I would say I have definitely gone through various stages in my career, but relative to the workforce, I take the lead from my kids. I have 3, so it helps me to look at how I parent my kids differently because they're different ages, and how I can take that skill and apply it to the folks in the workforce, because understanding what might appeal to someone my age and how I lead them is very different of how I incentivize the newer generations coming into the workplace.
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, it's that relatability. You might not be in that place, but can you relate to it?
Well, and I'll
Yeah, I
add
was
to
gonna
that. I think too, it's super important to create, learning cohorts where you're encouraging that diversity in generations. So, there's problems that they can solve together, and you're going to want the diversity, both, certainly in age, but in other ways too, where you as a leader, to the point of you can't really maybe solve all the problems, but you're identifying them, right? And so how do you bring together small groups where they can build trust, get to know one another, but they're diverse in age, and present the problem for them to work on together? I think that that's certainly worked well for me, because really when they're working together, they're getting to know one another, and creating that trust, right, throughout the whole team.
Yeah, absolutely. Maria, I know you're passionate about this topic as well.
And obviously, love, understanding what our younger generations can bring and how they want to learn. But I'm going to go out on a limb, you guys, and I'm just going to say every individual is different. We just talked about your children, how different they are, and they're a very common age group, right? I think you got to take every individual, and I always think about my tool belt, right? You can't use the hammer for everything. So I've got to get each of my individuals in front of me, the amount of age, background, it doesn't matter. I want to know what motivates them. I want to know how they learn, and I want to take them as the individual versus a generational. I think there are some commonalities that we certainly see at different generations, but I still think you got to get to the individual at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, unknowingly, you have the perfect segue into the next part of our conversation, which is really around diversity. And I think so often we think diversity is just what's on the outside. What's the color of my skin? Am I tall, short, male, female, anything in between? Do I speak differently, different language, or what have you? But diversity is diversity of thought. And that can come from two people that look exactly the same on the outside. You can even go as far as to say, identical twins, but they have a different way of thinking. And I think that's such a critical component of business today, and what having women at the table, different women at the table, a mixed group of people, really, and studies have shown that the more diverse companies are, the more successful they are. And Christine, I'm interested in your thoughts, and how in your career, you've been consumer energy for a long time, how you've helped kind of pull together diversity and inclusion, and what you might recommend.
I think for me, it's been a little maybe easy to do that, because shifting and pivoting to a career in technology, coming from the business, we didn't speak the same language. I mean, I was sitting in IT for my first few meetings going, you're talking about cloud, like the thing in the sky, right? So I had to learn to bridge that gap with my business partners and now my new technology family. So I've naturally just pulled business partners into the conversation, or pulled different IT groups into the conversation. At first, I was doing it because I needed to learn from them. I needed that diversity of thought. Now what I do is I encourage my team, hey, have you maybe run that past a peer? Have you considered including this person in that conversation? And sometimes it's somebody that they may not have thought of because, oh, well, they're not on our team, or it's not an infrastructure guy, or it's not an architect, or I need to talk to somebody in security. Well, do you need to include that person? Or have you considered the point of view of the end user? Have you talked to the end user? So I think that's one way I've done it. The other way to get them thinking, to get my teams thinking about that, is at Consumers Energy, we have a concept called Go and Seize. So go see the business, go talk to people in the business, literally boots on the ground, the guys and the gals in the field digging the ditches for pipes and hanging wires. Go see how they think and what they need in the world of technology and get their perspective. So I think that's really kind of opened up people's thinking on, oh, maybe I should include all these other people in the conversation.
Kathy, how about you? I know at Kelly, I think that's something that you've been pretty passionate about when you think about diversity and inclusion.
Absolutely. So about 4 years ago, I started a women's group at Kelly. It was something I was really passionate about, and getting a big forum for women to get together. We do a lot of programming around supporting women. I really try to get advocates, right? So to your point earlier, that was an exact conversation that I had with the men at Kelly. Like, they didn't want to come to my meetings, and I was said, you have a mother, you have a daughter, you have a wife. It's really important to be able to understand and support women at home and in the workplace. So something I'm really proud of. We have over 500 members. It's by far the largest affinity group at Kelly, and we've really helped launch quite a few other groups there as well.
That's fantastic. And I think that's something super critical when you think about having these various groups within your organizations. I lead our Genesis Women in Technology as executive sponsor as well. And I think sometimes when we try to be inclusive, it comes off as being exclusive. This is the GWIT, Women in Technology, and this is the veterans group, and then we're trying to be inclusive, yet we're exclusive but again, you don't have to be a woman to be a member. We just launched on Veterans Day, we just launched our group for veterans, and a message came out, I'm going to join that. I'm not a veteran, but I had relatives that were, and even if I didn't, it's such an important part of our current, and of course our past.
Well, we
and
call
our
them
history.
allies
Yes,
at Kelly,
exactly.
and advocates. So,
Yes.
you may not be part of that group, but you want to help support and be an ally. So,
Exactly.
I think I belong to every affinity group at Kelly. I can't go to all of the programs, but it really is, it's a great thing to do.
Yeah, so absolutely think of that if you have launched those in your own company, to really think, how can I be here and be an ally and be a supporter. Before I move on, anybody else want to add in terms of things that you've done or implemented from an diversity and inclusion standpoint?
I'm just going to throw a comment out because I think it was interesting. So when I was working with Kellogg Company, we had a number of, it was ERGs at the time, employee resource groups. That might be the not proper term anymore. And I was very proud to be on the leadership for the women of Kellogg. And I was part of the internship program at Kellogg, and I was assigned to University of Michigan, right? Amazing think tank of young people. And as we were there trying to get them excited about coming to work for Kellogg and tell them about all the ERG programs that we have and thinking how amazingly thoughtful we are, a student said to me, "What's wrong with your company that you have to have that? Why isn't the culture just accepting to all?" And I was like, oh, is that how that's being read?
Yeah.
And I didn't think that maybe younger people were looking at it that way. And obviously I was like, no, that's not the idea. We're not segmenting people. We're trying to find support and allies and people understand issues, because we were using those same resource groups to help us learn how to market better to our consumers, right? And I never thought that maybe our young people saw that as segmenting themselves and we were solving a problem. And I guess in some ways we were trying to make sure there was representation and allies, but maybe people have that thought, and we have to really express the value and mission of these groups so that that's better understood. Didn't dawn on me till they saw it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to the earlier conversation around kind of the generational differences. It's about being relatable. And I think just as humans, we have actually more similarities than we do differences. And so I think we spend a lot of time celebrating our differences. I'm also an advocate of celebrating how we're similar. Like I said, when I had, who's had a mother? I guess everybody.
Yeah.
Whether you like her or not, you have one or had one. And so it's really changing that mindset. And as we think about changing mindset, I really enjoyed the conversation around AI and around the economics around it, and what does that mean for us, right? I always try to tell people, especially when you're talking to people who are worried about losing their jobs, I say, yes, but you should also be able to do the higher level thinking. And so it helps other tasks get done so that we can do what humans are meant to do, which is to be thoughtful and thought-provoking, right, and have emotional intelligence. And so, interested, Sue, in your perspective of, how do you see the shift in this landscape, having an impact for women in leadership and as we become more diverse as organizations? Where does AI fit in?
I really think AI has a big opportunity in just the learning platforms that are out there. And I'm just curious how many more women will have access to leadership training that's more personalized to them through AI. Because I do think that is a gap today, right? You may be in a technical role today and just maybe not feel like you have access to develop your emotional intelligence or some of those other leadership skills. I'm just curious if those AI learning platforms might make that a better experience for women, so that they can have that be more accessible and tailored to them and their specific needs. Like Maria was saying, we're all individuals, right? And so, but especially as a woman in tech, I think we have some uniqueness. And so I'm curious if AI might help us reach that next level quicker, because we might have access to some training on some AI learning platforms that, those of us sitting up here didn't. But anyway, that was something that I thought of.
Yeah, absolutely. Kathy, how about you?
Yeah, I love where you're going with that. I think it's great to look at how you can take advantage of all that AI brings to the table and the quickness of it, right? That was something that really struck me as I was listening to some of the discussions this morning about how accelerated the impact is. So to your point, I love the idea of the individualized training and getting us there faster. Because it took us a long time to get where we are. So hopefully for the next generations coming up, they can get there a little faster.
Yeah, I think, it's the access to the training, but also I think there are a lot of platforms that are coming out there that also give access to jobs. I think what's so interesting, especially for people early in their career, and women and men alike, it's they don't really know what jobs there are, right? Or what does this job do? What skills? So in having conversations with a lot of people early in career, I said, well, just think of some titles and look around and see what the skills are. But so AI, and there are platforms that can do that. One of my daughters, two of my three daughters are in tech, and one is studying economics, but she works for a company that has a workforce management, basically a platform for helping them find jobs. And so to have access to know what jobs are out there, instead of just searching LinkedIn or searching some Indeed.com, which a lot of young people use, it actually helps them match their skills to jobs that are out there. And so I think AI can also play a huge role in helping people understand, take these jobs. We were talking in the back about our kids and what they do, and we're like, well, some of them don't want to do what we did because they saw how hard we worked, and they maybe don't want to work as hard. But they also don't know what's out there. They only see it like, ooh, technology, there's that fear. But I think it opens up the conversation around AI. And we're winding down with a couple of minutes, but we've talked a lot and made some jokes and things as well about our allies. Interested in what you all think. Like, how do we engage others? We talked a little bit about sponsors. We've talked about allies as part of our groups. What are some other ways that we can help? Because I know that there are a lot of folks in the workforce that are not women that want to play a role. And what do you suggest, Christine?
So a sponsor moment here. I'm on the board of Michigan Council of Women in Technology, and I'm incredibly passionate about growing women in tech. However, we love the guys. We need all of you, and women are just different than men. Men and women are different. So I think it's recognizing that we can each come to the table with something different, and working with the male leaders that I've had, I've personally just made sure that they knew, hey, this is what makes me tick, this is what motivates me. I don't know if that's different than the men or the women that you work with. But I think some more specific and tactical advice is for the guys out there, really pay attention to if you're recognizing any biases that might exist. And I know that's been a frequent topic of conversation around building allyship, but it still exists. I have a mentee today that she's not able to share things in meetings. She gets spoken over by all the rest of the guys on her team. So just little things like that to pay attention to. And all of you can absolutely make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think that's a really good point about those biases. I think that they're there, and just as men and women, just openly, respectfully talking about those. Maybe even before you go into the meeting, right? Especially if it's an important topic. And you do want to make sure that you're getting the thoughts of everyone. Especially as leaders, men leaders, just think about, as you're planning that work group or however you're going to solve that problem, have in mind, how are you going to invite and engage that diversity of thought? Because as leaders in the room, I think we have a responsibility to think about that before we're in the setting.
Great.
Creating space for people to be able to share
Yes.
their thoughts, especially women, because we have a tendency to like take a back seat sometimes. So
Absolutely.
really calling it out and giving that opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting close to our time. I'm going to throw a little curveball at the panelists here as we're just about at time. One word from each of you in terms of if you could consolidate advice to women that are looking to pursue an advancement in their career or looking to make some pivots. One word of advice. And I'm just going to go down the line. Maria.
One word. Oh
One
my
word.
goodness. Partnerships. Make partnerships.
Good.
Across business lines, outside of your company, make partnerships.
Great. Sue.
My word's going to be adaptability. So, and believe in yourself. You're meant to change and grow. And so embrace that and really be open. And so be adaptable.
Love it. Kathy.
Fearless.
Like it. Christine.
I think you picked a better word. I was thinking discomfort, and this is where I'm coming from. My mentor always tells me and reminds me, what doesn't challenge you won't change you. So you have to get comfortable with some discomfort and with that growth.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for spending this 30 minutes with us, and thank you. Please give a round of applause to our panelists.